Then we've got a chap that I put in before, but I've just added in some legs. So he's sat in a little deck chair or camping chair. So now you can see we're starting to create a sense of depth with the people. The lady in the foreground sat on the pebbles is obviously larger than the chap I just drew. So already, if you just look at that little section of the painting and those two people alone, for me at least, my brain is telling me that guy's further away than she is. Now there are also some people down nearer the water's edge. So I'm going to include a couple of those. And one of the reasons I like drawing with the watercolor marker is these marker pens, they really do just glide across the paper, especially if you've already sealed the surface with the acrylic. You know, going over dry acrylic, it's really nice to just draw on top of. And I feel the mark it makes is more in keeping with a line of acrylic paint than a pencil mark would be. So for that reason, if the watercolor marker shows in the finished product, I feel there's a better harmony in terms of mark making than there would be if I put a pencil line down and left some of that showing. Not that that's a bad thing to have pencil lines showing, but as I say, I just think it works better for me and for my style of painting. So we've got a couple down at the water's edge now. Then we need to decide, you know, where to put some more people. But very much with beach paintings, I think the presence of people doing very beach-like things, you know, very beach-specific activities like sitting at the water's edge or sitting next to a deck chair or under a parasol, or they might be carrying a surfboard, whatever it is, perhaps more than any other landscape, I think you know, it helps convey a sense of coastal within the painting. So now I'm painting in this, colouring in this deck chair, the fabric of the deck chair. So that looks to be almost pure alizarin crimson. And then while I've got that on the brush, I've just added a couple of marks here and there. So I'm starting to suggest some very distant people now. So they're just little dots off in the distance. That little diagonal mark, that line I put on the near the coast, near the waterline, I should say, on the bank of pebbles, that's meant to be, you know, perhaps a paddleboard or something dragged up onto the pebbles. But we're starting to put in a few heads of people in the midground. And then yellow ochre mixed with a little bit of alizarin and then quite a bit of white to get a colour which is going to be, you know, approximately appropriate for you know, the areas which aren't clothed basically on the people. So the lady on the left has a sleeveless top. The guy down near the water isn't wearing a shirt. So I can just begin to block in the colours, and that colour I want to be fairly bright because these people are out in the sun. But when they're in under the parasol, of course, things are going to be a bit more subdued. And equally, even if they're out in the sun, there are going to be some areas which are in shadow. So you can see you see how I've painted in the guy quite carefully, the one I drew in the deck chair. But now with that same colour, I've just added a few marks on the left to begin to suggest a multitude of people. And really in real life, if you think about walking through a crowd, if there are hundreds of people, there's no way you can register everybody's face. It's just impossible. And, you know, I'm sure you've had the experiences I have where you meet up with friends from work after the weekend or something, and you sort of say, oh, what did you do at the weekend? Oh, well, I went to Budleigh Salterton. Oh, did you? Oh, we were down there. Which day did you go? Oh, Sunday. Yeah, we were down on Sunday. And then you find out you were there at the same time, and you find out you were in the same, you know, geographical location to within about 20 yards, but you didn't actually see each other. So the reality of the crowd experience is, even if you're proactively trying to recognize lots of people, you can only take in a certain limited number, and the rest of them are just in your peripheral vision, your peripheral consciousness, and consequently you're not taking in the color of their eyes and the style of their hair. And so we can replicate that phenomenon within a painting by having a few things in detail and then a few other things just with little marks. Now the marks I'm making are a mixture of the mid-tone, but now I've switched to a lighter color. So when I'm looking off at the distant landscape, what I was seeing was, essentially fairly dark silhouettes, but little areas of the body or the person would be catching the light. So I don't need to worry about drawing an individual arm catching the light off in the distance, but there are going to be patches of lighter things. And sometimes those things might not be human. They might be, as I said, a white paddleboard or something. But hopefully those little bits of texture off near the base of the cliffs are starting to suggest the presence of some people there. Whereas before it was completely unoccupied. So really this exercise it's a little bit of trial and error. You can see I've gone to more of a pink color now. So I'm looking at the crowd and thinking, well, what colors are there most predominantly? And I've also kept a little bit of white. You see the orange parasol. Just above that, slightly above the left-hand edge of that, there's a little mark with a fairly dark pink and then a little burst of white. So I'm using that technique of not having mixed the paint too thoroughly on the brush, so I've got more than one color, and that creates interesting marks when you put it down. But now I've gone to sort of a bluey grey, and I'm using the edge of the filbert to put in some little vertical or slightly off vertical lines to suggest more and more people milling about, moving around, sitting on the pebbles. So the main thing is to get the orientation of those marks correct and also get the size right. But now, having moved to the middle ground, I can start to use that same color to hint at some cast shadows from those parasols or figures lying on the beach. The point is to create a sense of busyness and a sense of activity. So now back in with a darker blue. And now we're beginning to draw in. I'm not sure why I didn't use the watercolor marker here, probably just because I had the filbert brush on the go and I thought it would work okay. But I could have done the same thing here with the watercolor marker pen. So we've got a figure standing there facing the water with a hat on. So how many figures have we got actually described so far? We've got the lady on the left by the deck chair. We've got the chap underneath the yellow parasol. Arguably, we've got a guy standing next to the other yellow parasol. We've got the figure I just drew with the hat on, and we've got the couple by the beach. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 figures actually drawn, and the rest are just marks so far. Coming in with this darker blue. So contrast is obviously important if you want to create a sense of light. If you're working on a white background and you put down a shadow, a cast shadow, next to the outline of an object you've drawn, immediately you can create a sense of light. And the reverse is true, obviously, if you're working on a darker background. And in fact, if you haven't tried it before, if you get some, say, purple or quite dark grey sugar paper, and then paint on top of that with acrylic, with perhaps a bright yellow, the paint will really seem to glow. It's really quite a nice effect. It's just an optical illusion, but it's worth experimenting with if you haven't tried it before. So coming in with pure white here, adding a stripe to that yellow parasol. And that's going to help create a sense of 3 dimensions. So logos and things that are, put on, say, the side of a van, or wrap around the corner of a van, or go over the curved surface of a parasol, whatever it is, it all helps to create a sense of 3 dimensions, because the shape gets distorted